Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Lots of things that are happening this morning. So first, we want to dig into some comments that Brazil's President Lula made that are igniting a firestorm over Ukraine and how we should approach it, and Russia and all of that good stuff. So we will dig into all of that. We also have, listen, we haven't been talking about it for a while, but the debt ceiling is fast approaching.
Very much.
Kevin McCarthy went to Wall Street to make his pitch, which was kind of an interesting choice. We still don't have a lot of details about what the Republican proposal is. So we'll give you all of that breakdown as well. Nikki Haley, we covered was it last week that her fundraising numbers come out? We covered how, okay, it's pretty impressive haul. Turns out she was lying about how much money she brought in.
Totally cooked the
using
books.
Some clever accounting tricks,
right.
Or as someone in a different era might have said, fuzzy math to get there. So we'll break down that for you as well. And also, I know a lot of people out there are going to be disappointed. Mike Pompeo is not running for president in 2024. So I'm sorry to break it to all of you, but that is what we can tell you this morning. We also have Elon Musk weighing in on the threat of AI. Saagar and I will talk a little bit about that and how exactly you would regulate it if you did want to do that. And it looks like the Fox News Dominion trial is moving forward today. It was postponed by one day because it looked like Fox was trying to settle in advance. I guess they did not come to a settlement, so the trial is set to commence today. So we'll tell you what we know about that as well. And Congressman Ro Khanna is set to be here in the studio to talk about why Dianne Feinstein should go ahead and step down. Before we get to any of that, though, Spotify video.
Yes, that's right. I know everyone has probably knows at this point, but for the very last few people on Earth who haven't heard, premium members can get video on Spotify. Take advantage of it. BreakingPoints.com. Support our work here. You get to watch the full show over there, and I know a lot of people are taking advantage. But with that, let's actually begin with the show. We wanted to talk a little bit about the global situation. There are two separate parts here. First is how foreign leaders, and a constant theme of what we've been trying to discuss in recent weeks, is not only from the revelations on the classified documents about the way that the rest of the world does not really agree with us in the way that the Ukraine conflict is being handled, but specifically many very close and important U.S. allies. Namely, one of them is Brazil and the newly elected president Lula, who actually, in a recent interview with CNN and other outlets in Brazil, made some of his most stunning comments yet. Let's go ahead and play this for everybody. We have subtitles that I can go ahead and read from. So let's go ahead and play this VO. Patience is needed to talk with the president of Russia. It takes patience to talk with the president of Ukraine. He specifically goes ahead and says, but we have to, above all, convince the countries that are supplying weapons, encouraging war, to stop. This is a direct call out of the U.S. I think China has a very important role. I keep reiterating that China has possibly the most important role. Now, another important country is the United States. That is, the United States needs to stop encouraging war and start talking about peace. The European Union needs to start talking about peace as well in order to be able to convince Putin and Zelensky that peace interests everybody and the war only interests the two of them. So those are significant comments, and of course, you can dispute the characterization, but I don't think it's a mistake that he made that comment while he was in China. And one of the reasons he is in China is we have this, theory that everything kind of revolves around us.
Yeah.
The reason he was there was because of past comments about pricing oil deals between the two outside of the U.S. dollar. So this is kind of a double whammy against the U.S. because it's both a shot at the petrodollar in the visit itself, but second, it is a call out and really an implicit saying that, like, we don't agree with you at all in the way that you are handling this conflict. Now, of course, we can have the caveats like Russia invaded Ukraine, etc. Like Ukraine is defending. All that said, like what India, South Korea, other countries, Japan, and others have all come around to the conclusion of is we don't believe that continuing to just flow weapons in here is the best possible way to achieve peace as was originally sold to the global community and to the American people and most of the West.
Leaders that represent an overwhelming majority of the world share a very similar view to what Lula is articulating here, but it's a view that is almost completely invisibilized within the U.S. Western press mainstream. And when it is articulated, you get accused of being pro-war, Russian flag, all those sorts of things. You guys know how it goes. I think it's important to listen to these voices, number one. Number two, I don't know how you can really dispute at this point in the game that the U.S. has encouraged this war to go on, because we have multiple instances of the U.S. and the U.K. in particular intervening to block any potential peace deals from ever getting off the ground. So that's number one. Number two, one of the things that we unearthed in those leaked documents that was it reported anywhere else? I'm not sure. Was that Russia was open to the proposal from Brazil to work together with a number of other unaligned countries in order to try to broker a peace deal. Now, is Russia genuine? Would this actually?
Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah.
We don't know. But the fact that, our folks know that Russia is actually open to these sort of approaches from Brazil, and that there's a possibility of restarting some sort of diplomatic negotiation, something that Zelensky himself has not put off the table, even as the U.S. has stood firmly against any sort of negotiations at the present time. So I think that's important to note as well.
Yeah, and let's go and put the next one up here, because this shows you even bigger the cracks that are remaining in the Western alliance. It says EU leaders beat a path to Xi's door seeking China's help. This again underscores not only the French President Emmanuel Macron's state visit to Beijing and the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, but also the Spanish Prime Minister, the German Foreign Minister arrived in the northeastern part on Thursday. Olaf Scholz was there in November. The EU Foreign Policy Chief is going to be in China, or was going to be in China this week, but he tested positive apparently for COVID. There are so many high-profile Western leaders that are trekking to Beijing for one specific purpose. Obviously, they want, especially the ones who are not the UK and the US, I guess the Anglosphere, you could say, are the ones who have a direct economic interest in getting the conflict done as soon as possible, have never really agreed with the US view of how things are going to go, and view the Chinese offer of peace not necessarily as genuine, but as a possible off-ramp for what has been an economic disaster for their economies. And they view their offer of being able to have some sort of broker as not only legitimate, but very important. And this, again, is a big problem for America, who has long been at least wanted to be, the global peacemaker at the center of the deal. We've effectively removed ourselves from this entire process, and the rest of global public opinion, as well as global diplomacy, seems to be coalescing away from us. This is actually a first in a very long time, I think basically since Iraq, that such a thing has happened, Krystal. You are watching, a global consensus form without the U.S. at the center of the table. I don't have to tell everyone again why that's a problem in terms of trying to get our stuff done whenever we decide to directly pick a horse in the race and not necessarily be seen as a possible broker or even, possible a fair person between all parties. And then similarly, what we continue to see is this is becoming a mainstream view. It's not just here on Breaking Points that we're talking about. I'm now watching Larry Summers talk about how he's at the IMF and how other countries no longer care as much what America thinks. And listen, Summers is wrong about a lot, but I think he is a good fair weather in terms of what is now okay to say in the establishment.
Yeah.
And it's not just Summers. You have like Thomas Friedman, people like that who are out there watching what China did between Saudi Arabia and Iran, watching how Lula is reacting, looking at how India is, looking at how we're basically browbeating the South Koreans, looking at the fact that the Japanese just 2 weeks ago said, yeah, we're going to go and buy Russian oil above the price cap, and we just don't really care about whatever your Western stuff is. Like, how can you look at that fate and then all of these leaders trekking to Beijing and say, like, America is right now at the center of the action and is where the everything is revolving around? It's just simply, it's increasingly becoming not the case.
Yeah.
And that causes a lot of problems for us, not only economically, but really diplomatically in the future.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, to back up for a second, just to put things at a high level, the U.S. perceives it to be in our interest to maintain a unipolar world. Basically, everybody else in the world perceives it to be in their interest to have a multipolar world. I mean, that's basically the reality. Now, personally, I think it's arguable that it only comes with benefits to have a unipolar world, because part of what that comes with is this overstretched military and all of the, obligations that we take onto ourselves to police the entire world. We'll put that debate aside for another day, because what's clear is the U.S. obviously thinks we should maintain a unipolar world. That's why we're fighting Russia and Ukraine. That's why we're ratcheting up tensions with China, our two main multipolar polar rivals. And it's why the rest of the world sees this all very differently, because, you see it with the EU. Okay, they're on our side in this Ukrainian fight, sort of, partially, right? But they're not so sure they're going to align with us if, something came down the pike in the future and you had China invade Taiwan and we tried to take an aggressive stance and levied the same sort of sanctions we did against Russia. There's no indication that they're going to be with us on that. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind as we imagine what the future is going to look like.
I'm glad that you said that, because people like Bridge Colby, who we've had here on the show, and I encourage people to follow him. He's an outright Taiwan hawk, but he is also a realist whenever it comes to Europe. And he's like, look at these people. They actually don't agree with us on a lot. They really don't agree with us on China policy. They wouldn't have our back. So why are we underwriting all of European security? If we believe that the future is in Asia, which I do, which Bridge does as well, 50% of global GDP, declining GDP all across Europe. You have declining demographics, decreasing cultural relevance. To the extent that this is a problem, we have the world's 7th largest economy up against, Ukraine was, I don't even know what ranking it was on there. And then all of those together barely even equal the GDP output, at least the projections that are coming out of it. Why would we want to spend all of our political, domestic, our foreign policy capital and hundreds of billions of dollars in economic sacrifice on our parts and in the higher energy prices on top of the weapons that were flowing into this, while we have a whole other thing going on here, which doesn't involve Germany, doesn't involve France, it involves the very allies that we are strong-arming and depleting right now. South Korea, Japan, dynamic economies which produce stuff which is important to us, who actually have our back in many conflicts. They pay above 2% on their GDP. I mean, I could go on forever in terms of who the actual real allies are and who the the moochers and the leeches are.
Well,
and
South Korea and Japan haven't really been there with us in the Ukraine fight.
That's my point, though.
Yeah.
And they don't. Why should they? Because they're like,
I agree.
South Korea has got a warring nation with nukes to its north and a standing military that they have to maintain. Japan is pissed off everybody in the region for, and everyone's pissed at them. You could just say whose side you want to be on. But regardless, we buy a lot of stuff from them and they buy a lot of stuff from us, and they're one of the world's most important economies. Singapore increasingly also being encircled. They don't really know what to do in terms of how to deal with China. Vietnam as well is in a tough position. Who are they going to pick? Mostly they've decided to pick us. The Philippines. I mean, all of these countries are tremendously important, far more important in my opinion, especially for the future, than any country on the entire European continent. And yet they get zero of their due. I didn't even mention India, which one of the world's largest economies, basically is written off as some global backwater.
India just passed China for population.
Yes, exactly. And they get no respect. And I'm not even just saying this because I'm Indian. I'm like, I can read a map, or I can look at a map and I can look at a chart and just be like,
details.
All right, so where are things going?
Yeah.
Like, it's not complicated to figure this stuff out.
The other thing that I want to say before we move on is, we have, with our own foolish and arrogant actions, helped to force this new multipolar world into being. I mean, especially with our sanctions regimes against a number of countries, but in particular now against Russia. Russia, leading up to this point, was preparing for this moment, expecting that there may be a time when we try to put the full force of our economic warfare against them. And China is seeing the same thing playing out, and they are also building up their own sort of immunity to that sort of economic war. And we can also see that, even with us going to the mat, basically doing everything we can to cut off any sort of funding coming in for the Russian war economy, it hasn't worked as effectively as we certainly thought and wanted it to. So we've also sort of shown our hand there. But, the petrodollar deals, the Brazil and China deal that's going on, like all of these things are in part a result of the fact that we have tried to throw our weight around in a global way, tried to punish populations, tried to punish countries and coerce them. And so they're not idiots. They're like, we're going to try to protect ourselves and make sure that we are not vulnerable to the same sort of thing by moving away from total reliance on the dollar.
Yeah, I again just want to come back to a very realistic view of the world. Like, America is an empire. We have the global hegemon. We have total control, at least did, over the global financial system. And we decided to play our hand on a country, Ukraine, where at the end of the day, the fate of Kyiv has absolutely zero impact on the economic activity here in the United States, as well as our day-to-day life. You could say whatever you want about Taiwan. You could say we shouldn't defend it or not. You can't deny that the fate of Taipei is basically holding the global economy. Now, is it worth it or not? That's a completely valid discussion and debate. But that's part of the problem is we don't talk in terms of real impact on our ability to conduct commerce and to live. You know, even whenever you look back at the Second World War, like, you know why Japan attacked us? We always like to think like it's some global authoritarian fight. They attacked us because we cut off their oil. Like it was about one thing. It's about ability to conduct commerce, to run your military in an independent future. That is how most countries throughout all of human history made decisions. It's only recently that we're like, oh, right to protect and human rights and all this other, frankly, which I think is nonsense because it is arrogance belied by the unipolar moment from the 1990s. Like, that it came from the ability that we defeated the Soviet Union. That's great. Yeah. They crumbled, and then we had the dot-com bubble and the peace dividend and all of that. And then what do? Oh, we decided to invade Iraq, waste $7 trillion. I think you're right. I mean, we have nobody but ourselves to blame for wasting what should have been a tremendous opportunity. Just go back in time and think about what would have happened if we hadn't invaded Iraq. And if we had gone in and we killed bin Laden in 2001, and we never never invaded Iraq. I can't even fathom like how much richer as a society and better off that we possibly could be.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.